has invited Tan Ajahn Achalo to give the Dhamma talk via Zoom. He's in his monastery in Phetchabun province, which is kind of up towards the north of Thailand. And so Ajahn Achalo is a close disciple of Tan Ajahn Anan, spent a number of years practicing here under his guidance, and has been a disciple of Tan Ajahn for a few decades now. And so I'd like to invite him to give the Dhamma talk.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Good evening, everybody. Tan Ajahn Anan has asked me to share some reflection, some encouragement. I spoke with Tan Ajahn on the phone a little earlier. He mentioned that you'd had a long Q&A session with you earlier. One of the subjects that came up for reflection was faith and how we develop our faith from a faculty or from a heart quality to being something that is truly powerful, a kind of something that would manifest as a resolution, impel us to practice to reach the other shore of Nibbana. So Tan Ajahn asked me to explore that subject a little bit with you. So first of all, I'd like to ask permission to speak on Dhamma from the fellow Mahathera and several abbots from India. Tan Ajahn Somchai, Tan Ajahn Anan. I ask permission to speak on Dhamma. So Lord Buddha mentions a list of 5 faculties: faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And he explains that they can be developed to become spiritual powers. And this is a very pertinent, potent, relevant list and a wonderful list of Dhammas, because when Lord Buddha was recently enlightened under the Bodhi tree, in a period immediately after his enlightenment, he would spend under different trees in the area days in the bliss of liberation. And then he would consider, after coming out of the bliss of liberation, how it was possible that he attained to such a profound and amazing realization and experience. And one of the verses of Dhamma that he shared at that time, that he later relayed to Venerable Ananda, is that it's these 5 spiritual powers, when made much of, when cultivated, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless being another way of saying Nibbana. So faith comes first. And this is, understanding Lord Buddha has the most profound, pervasive, extensive, and practical wisdom. Lord Buddha's wisdom is amazing in that it's practical, it's logical, and it's all-encompassing. So we can have confidence that he put faith first for a reason. Faith is a faculty that human beings have, and it's very important that we recognize this, because if we don't recognize that there is a faith faculty, we may end up having faith in things that we shouldn't have. So you can see a lot of teenagers that get obsessed with popular culture. They might have a kind of a loving devotion towards, about 10 years ago, it was Justin Bieber. I don't know who it is now, Ariana Grande or something, that teenagers put these posters of these pop artists on their walls, and they have a loving devotion. And oftentimes, these people aren't the best examples of a guru or spiritual refuge. And so we need to recognize that there is this faith faculty. We need to put it in the right place. Now, of course, I'm talking to a group of people who've traveled from other countries to come and practice in a monastery with a great master. So clearly, you do have faith in the Buddha, his teachings, and his well-practiced disciples. That's wonderful. Then a question then is, how do we cultivate that to be truly powerful? So I would say for all of you, it's already powerful. It's already powerful because you're willing to cross seas and continents and come and get up early and put up with all sorts of irritations and frustrations in the process, which is wonderful, sadhu. And but for faith to become a power, I think we need to look at like the other qualities that the Lord Buddha mentions. Energy comes next, virya. And so our faith needs to translate as or manifest as effort. Look at what comes next, mindfulness, then concentration, then wisdom. So this faith that we have brings about a certain quality of energy into our hearts. And sometimes faith is translated as confidence. It's actually several things, few ways to approach it. One has confidence in the Buddha's enlightenment. One has confidence that Nibbana exists. Very important then to have confidence in the fact that one has a similar potential. You have the ability to realize the liberation that Lord Buddha realized. So that means also having faith and confidence in the Four Noble Truths, the fact of suffering, the cause of suffering, the fact that there is an end to suffering, and the path that leads to the end of suffering. So we have faith and confidence in those things. But we have to channel our faith in a way, distill and channel our faith into the correct mode of practice. So Tan Ajahn Chah put a great deal of emphasis upon maintaining mindfulness in all four postures and cultivating right mindfulness with the understanding that when one maintains mindfulness throughout the day in all postures and refines it further in formal meditation, Samma Sati, right mindfulness, becomes Samma Samadhi, right collectedness. And then in the spiritual powers, you've got Samma Sati, the Sati, mindfulness, the Samadhi, and then you've got the Panya, the wisdom. So it's with this clear, consistent mindfulness and the foundation that comes from the collectedness that gives rise to, that's the foundation upon which insight can be truly penetrative, and you can begin to experience vipassana jnana, direct insight into the three characteristics, or temporary liberation. Tan Ajahn talks about experiencing the mind that has no suffering for periods of time. So we should investigate how is our faith? Do we have faith in Lord Buddha? Sometimes it's like we take it a bit for granted. We do the chanting, it's a bit perfunctory. And it's good to, when we do these anusatis, to really think about it. Do I have faith in Lord Buddha? And then the answer probably arises, yes. Then you can ask yourself, why? Why do I have faith in Lord Buddha? And so, well, he realized Nibbana, he liberated his mind from greed, hatred, and delusion. On top of that, he was impeccable in conduct. It's described in the suttas, he had a mind quivering with compassion for all beings. Although he was transcendent, he was also a beautiful being. That word they used to describe the Buddha, Tathagata, means thus come and thus gone at the same time. So he's manifest, he's there, this perfect being who has realized liberation and isn't attached to any of the perfect conditions he's manifested after eons and eons and eons. But the reason we do that is to deepen that faith, to understand why we have faith. And then what happens is that gives rise to good energy. Then you ask yourself, well, do you have faith in Dhamma? So we go for refuge. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. Do you have faith in Dhamma? And you also ask yourself, well, what is Dhamma? Dhamma is the teachings, the description of what we need to contemplate in order to liberate ourselves, but Dhamma is also ultimate truth. And the teachings lead us to experience and realize deeper truth, ultimate truth, have glimpses into it, and realizing, glimpsing deeper truth destroys ignorance and delusion. And so we ask ourselves, do I really have faith in the Dhamma? The answer for people who are practicing is normally yes. And then you could ask why. Just as it says in the chanting, the Dhamma holds those who uphold it from falling into delusion. Ask yourself, does the Dhamma have the power to transform minds? Does the Dhamma have the power to destroy the kilesas? Yes, we know some people who've done it. Then we really rejoice in that. We really hold that in the heart. Wow, wonderful that we've met this, difficult to meet. Then we need to ask ourselves, do I have faith that I can practice Dhamma, I can have insight into Dhamma, and that Dhamma will liberate this mind from greed, hatred, and suffering? And if there's a bit of resistance there, this is an important thing to explore, because a lot of people from Judeo-Christian cultures in particular have a kind of because we absorbed in our cultures a kind of a guilt, coming partly from the idea that an avatar of a god died for our sins, some kind of idea of original sin. This does affect culture and it does affect people's minds. It's very different to the Buddhist teaching that beings have a kind of a original mind, a kind of a purity underneath it all. And so we need to have a look. Do you secretly feel that you can't do it? And if that manifests, the Dhamma might be something that the Buddha realized, or the Dhamma might be something that a few arahants realized, but I don't think I can do it. Well, then we need to challenge that. Doubt being one of the 5 hindrances, and doubt is, the 5 hindrances are described as robbers or bandits because they steal away the peacefulness. And faith is confidence, and we want ideally to have unshakable faith, and doubt is going to damage that. Like if you feel that you can't do it, other people can do it, but I can't, then you're not going to have unshakable faith, unwavering faith in your ability. So we have a look and we do some investigation, and we have to challenge any kind of withholding of, or a negative perception or a fixed idea that I can't do it. We need to have a look if that's there. If that isn't there, great. But if it is there, you need to challenge it. And we need to say, look, the Dhamma is a law that applies to all phenomenon. It's anicca, it's anatta. There's no exception. So if it's the nature of beings' minds to be affected by greed, hatred, and delusion in the beginning, then, and if it's possible that greed, hatred, and delusion can be eradicated, the mind can be purified as embodied by the Buddhas and the Arahants, then that applies to everybody. And then we need to kind of wrestle the horns of that withholding of confidence and make kind of positive affirmations. I have faith in the Dhamma. I have faith that the Dhamma is going to liberate this being. All that is left is for me to practice consistently. So that's where the sati, spiritual power, we need to make effort to be mindful. And Tan Ajahn Achalo, Lumpur Anan, I know Lumpur Anan's been saying to you all that we all need to practice. Practice is important. So many people have a lot of wholesome projects or duties because it's a large part of Buddha's practice to be generous, to be kind, to be altruistic. That's the foundation, the good-heartedness. But once we have that foundation, once we have that good-heartedness, which is weakening our tendency towards selfishness, and then we do need to practice. And the reason we do the formal practice is because this clarifies, purifies, strengthens the mindfulness so that the mindfulness can become powerful. So most people have, everybody has some mindfulness, even people who don't meditate. But we need to understand that ordinary mindfulness is kind of fuzzy, dissipated, not yet powerful. And what we find in meditation retreats is when we apply ourselves at doing the morning meditation, doing the chanting, sweeping mindfully, doing the walking meditation, this quality of presence of mind, clarity, becomes more palpable. You kind of notice that there is presence of mind. One notices one's thoughts more quickly. And as mindfulness gets stronger, we also begin to notice that we notice the quality of the thought. We notice that we're thinking. We notice the quality of the thought. And if it's unwholesome, we're able to let go of it more quickly when we have good mindfulness. We will also notice that after periods of retreat, we might go back to our ordinary life. We get busy again. We get a bit distracted, might miss a few sessions. And we notice that there might be the mindfulness that knows us thinking and knows the thinking as unwholesome, but there isn't the power to let it go. When we notice this, we have to notice this, and we have to develop the confidence, our faith in the Buddha, our faith in the Sangha, our faith in the Dhamma, our faith in our potential, has to translate as a consistent effort that makes our mindfulness strong to the point where that mindfulness is starting to see ignorance and delusion and drop it. See, the antidote to ignorance is clearly knowing. Ignorance is sometimes described as forgetting. Mindfulness is described as right recollection, remembering, being aware of the body, being aware of emotions, being aware of thoughts, knowing if they're wholesome, neutral, unwholesome. So Luang Por Chah placed great emphasis on that, the way the monks walked, the way the monks placed their bags, the way the monks swept, where they were able to talk or not, how they talked. Everything in the lifestyle at Ajahn Chah's monastery required circumspection, care. And this was a lifestyle that supports the development of mindfulness. So we need to be really careful not to bring too much judgmentalness or ill will to our noticing our mind states. This is another thing that modern people tend to bring to practice that isn't very helpful, an excessive fault-finding mind. So it's tricky, isn't it? We need to notice when unwholesome dhammas are present. We need to notice that. But we don't add on to that rejecting ourselves or hating ourselves, because that's just adding negativity on top of negativity. And so I'm going to give a little analogy because I think it's relevant. I recently started practicing doing water paintings of lotus flowers. And for some years, I've wanted to do water paintings of lotuses. I don't know why. It might be old habits, or it might be my character or whatever. And so I decided to do 15 lotuses in 15 days. I'm doing it as a practice. And I'm a complete beginner. And what's interesting is when you start something new from the beginning, you have to really pay attention and you have to really try. And so that's quite peaceful. I can't let my mind go into distracted, restless thoughts or thoughts about other things. I have to really focus if I want my water lily or my lotus to be beautiful. And what's interesting is, like, looking at the first one, it's like, it doesn't really look like a lotus, right? So I have to notice what's wrong with those. It's like one has to notice what's good, what's nice, what's kind of sort of working, and what isn't working. And I'm doing this as I'm not expecting myself to do perfect lotuses and master lotus painting on the first day. So I'm able to look at it and see what looks kind of nice in terms of colors and blending, but what isn't quite working. And so I remember doing the third one. It was a purple water lily. And I finished it. I really didn't like it because the perspective was wrong, the size was wrong, the shading was wrong. It didn't look real. It looked like a child did it. Okay, I'm a beginner. But what was very interesting was, that's the third one, is the fourth one. And I really tried, okay, I want you to get the perspective and I want you to get the shading and everything. And the fourth one was really quite good, probably the best one that I did out of I've done 14 so far. And so the point I'm making is, one has to be able to objectively look at what isn't so good and what isn't working and what isn't beautiful without giving up, and then trying harder And then we experience this in our meditation. Like we do a meditation retreat, some of the sits are peaceful, some of them aren't. And then maybe in 10 days, it's like, oh, wow, that was really peaceful. And we have to take heart from that. We have to understand that, yes, this is what we do. We keep laying the causes, we keep laying the conditions in, and overall, over a period of time, there's going to be more peaks, and the general level gets higher, slow but steady, with ups and downs, but the general level is going higher. But the point I'm making is we need to be able to look at the picture, see what is beautiful, what is lovely, what really isn't beautiful, what really isn't lovely, what isn't going to serve ours and others' best interest, and try harder and make more efforts, and then the lotus will blossom. Tan Ajahn Anan sometimes refers to people who keep sila, the 8 precepts. It's as if the lotus of virtue blossoms in their hearts. And when the lotus of virtue blossoms in a being's heart, they experience a kind of a well-being that comes from freedom from remorse and confidence about goodness, the goodness of their nature, the goodness of their behavior. So it's a real gift to ourselves when we keep our precepts and we maintain our goodness. But we do need to notice, the 5 spiritual powers, then we've got the 5 hindrances. So we don't want to add aversion don't want to add fault finding. We want to be able to objectively notice and adjust. And so metta practice is very helpful for supporting that. If we understand that the reason we're practicing is because we want to liberate this being from suffering, it's really, really helpful if you come from kindness. And so if you have that compassionate, kind intention to lessen your suffering, realize your deeper potential, then it's going to be easier to maintain a consistent effort. If when you come to sit, there's a lot of fault finding there, there's a lot of criticism there, you're going to find that you don't really enjoy sitting, you don't want to sit much, it's too painful. But if you develop some skill at being able to hold loving kindness in your own heart, pervade this mind and body with loving kindness, radiated outwards, a sublime abiding, then meditation practice becomes much more enjoyable. And Lord Buddha says in the sutta on the 11 benefits of loving kindness, for those who cultivate loving kindness, the mind becomes peaceful easily. So this is something, many people want to have a peaceful mind. So it's something to take note of. Lord Buddha told us that if we cultivate metta, our minds will become peaceful more easily. So when we're more consistent in our mindfulness and we're consistent with our regular formal practice, we start to experience more periods of samadhi, so rapture, tranquility, serenity. And very important, the consistency is very important because unfortunately, these qualities, although they can become very powerful, it really tends to be a slow and steady process, and it takes longer to develop them to be truly powerful than it takes to damage them. So if we're consistent and if we slowly increase our efforts, we'll find that things get better and better and better. But if we do it for some time and then completely stop, get very busy, get very distracted, when we come back to practices as if we're starting again. And this can be very frustrating. So one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself as a spiritual practitioner is to be consistent. And even if like after a long day, you feel like you're too tired, it's still worth it to sit there with a drooping head sitting, trying, because you're bringing more mindfulness and you're maintaining the habit. And the next day, you'll be more likely to do it. And that's a big part of the monk's lifestyle, is that we do have to do our morning sitting. We do have to do our afternoon sitting, our evening sitting. So there's a reason for that. That's what brings the best results over time. So when we have consistent mindfulness, we have some stability, some experience of tranquility, rapture, steadiness, then the mind can have insights. And Tan Ajahn, I'm sure, has talked a lot about that. What kind of insights are seeing the body as elements, seeing the body as parts, seeing the body as bones. And one needs to understand, or I think it's helpful if it's emphasized, that the mind that sees the body as elements, the mind that sees the body as bones organs is experiencing a great deal of tranquility and rapture. And one thing that Ajahn Sumedho says when we're investigating the Four Noble Truths and we're having a look at this noble truth of suffering, Lompo Sumedho says, that which knows suffering isn't suffering. It's not just all suffering, right? It's like when we have this truth discerning awareness, this presence of mind we're able to rest in our mindful awareness, then there's a peacefulness and a calm to that from which we can see dukkha, the causes of dukkha, and start letting them go. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about those 5 powers and encourage people to develop and deepen their faith. And Tan Ajahn may have asked me to talk on this because I'm among the Western monks, I probably have quite a strong faith character type. And so for myself, having faith in Saka, the rule of gods, Indra, or Maitreya Bodhisattva, the future Buddha, or Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, these kind of things, that's not difficult for me at all. I have faith in these beings. And Devanusati is one of my practices. When I recollect the existence of devas, I feel quite rapturous and joyful, happy. That gives me a lot of joy. And but like all practitioners, I have my strengths, I have my weaknesses, and we all tend to be a bit lazy at times or getting stuck in habits. So one practice that I've cultivated, kind of utilizing the fact that I do have strong faith, is that I drag myself off to Bodh Gaya once or twice a year, and I force myself to sit for 10 hours a day for a month at a time. Now, the thing is, I probably couldn't do that anywhere else, but I can do it in Bodh Gaya, which is why I go. And because when you're in the place where Lord Buddha, after practicing his austerities for 6 years, eating just that half a palmful of rice, being so emaciated, when I'm sitting there and I'm in pain, and it's like when I think of, I can't do it, I don't want to do this, I open my eyes and remember where I am under the Bodhi tree and remember what the Buddha accomplished there. And it's all relative. It's like, well, if the Bodhisattva could do that, if the Bodhisattva spent 4 incalculables plus 100,000 eons cultivating virtues and qualities, accumulating merits so that he could teach us, then it's like, okay, I can sit a bit more, I can sit a bit longer. And so it's not 10 hours in one stretch, it's 4 sessions of 2.5 hours. And I changed the posture slightly twice within that 2.5 hours. That's something that I cultivated over many years. I worked up from 6 hours, 6.5 hours, 8 hours, 8.5 hours, up to 10 hours. And I can say from my own experience that when I'm more consistent with my efforts and meditate a lot, the mindfulness definitely gets better, the samadhi gets better, and there are some insights, there are some great experiences which have given me confidence in the Buddha and what he realized and how to practice in order to realize that. So I made a vow to finish 1,000 hours of meditation under the Bodhi tree. And when I finished the 1,000 hours, I felt so rapturously happy. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do 2,000 hours more. I made a vow, 1,000 for the Buddha, 1,000 for the Dhamma, 1,000 for the Sangha. And that meant I had to go back twice a year for 6 weeks and keep plodding away, doing about 400 hours of meditation each time. And I remember I got to the 2,000 hours point and it was like, oh God, why did I vow to do 3,000? This is really getting hard now. And, but I did keep going back. And then when I got to the 3,000 hours, you know what I did? I said, okay, well, might as well add another 1,000. I'm going to do 4,000 hours. Because when it becomes a part of your character, sometimes we have to chafe quite a bit. We have to work with resistance to establish these kind of more heroic effort. But when you start to see the benefits of it, when get a bit lazy and, oh no, I really want to practice that hard again because I want that light, nice, clear mindfulness. I want that deeper samadhi. I want those beautiful insights. I want to experience temporary liberations from all suffering. I want to glimpse the mind's potential. And okay, keep doing it. Getting older, and I'm actually going back to India in 13 days. for 6 weeks, and I should be able to tick off the 4,000th hour during that time, if samsara permitting. One of the other things Tan Ajahn he mentioned that perhaps I could talk about with you is how does this quality of faith that we develop manifest in future lives so that we keep practicing. And so Tan Ajahn Anan obviously ordained as quite a young man. So did I. I became a novice monk at 22 and a bhikkhu at 24. And I think one of the ways faith manifests, so I can talk about my own life as an example, the way that a deep faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha manifested is that I didn't have faith in anything else. And that was actually a difficult experience as a teenager. I didn't have faith in university education. I didn't have faith in politicians. I didn't have faith in military or armies, and I didn't know what to have faith in. And it was very dry, alienating, quite painful. But there was this sense of there is something out there which is worth finding, and I'm going to find it, whatever it is. And I was very fortunate that I did a 10-day meditation retreat at the age of 19, and one of these Goenka Vipassana retreats. But I think the way the faith manifested is, somebody where I worked said, there is this 10-day retreat that you can do. And there's this feeling inside which is like, I want to do it. So I hadn't read a single Buddhist book. I hadn't had much spiritual life as a child. We didn't go to church. But when the option came to do a 10-day retreat, I wanted to do it. So that's, I think, past practices, past imprints. There's an interest in meditation. And I went and I sat, and it was extremely painful because in Australia, we don't do much sitting on the floor. We sit on sofas, we sit on bean bags, we sit at tables and chairs. And so it's just pain and pain and pain. But on day 8, my mind experienced some deep peacefulness. It experienced a quality of coolness, fullness, contentment, probably just for 10 or 20 seconds. But there was something in me that recognized this is what I've been looking for. This is something I can have faith in, and it's not outside. And this is why I haven't had faith in career or university or degrees. I've been looking for something else, and this is it. And from that day onwards, I meditated every day because Goenkaji, he said, meditation is like anything. Athletes train to run marathons, and various professionals in every field train and practice and practice and train, and meditators must do the same thing. And he said you should meditate for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And I was 19, and after that retreat, I managed to do that for a month or so. And then it became 1 hour once a day. And after 6 months, it became 40 minutes. And after 9 months, it became 20 minutes. And many people have this experience of doing a retreat and getting inspired and making an effort, and that effort getting less and less. But it was the beginning of a committed daily meditation practice. And I think that the merit that produced was what led me to Thailand a couple of years later. So past practice, past experiences of peacefulness is going to manifest as an intuitive sense in future lives of there's something to find. The inner refuge, the refuge of Dhamma, there's something out there. And it's also going to manifest as a kind of a sharp intuition, I think, about what is correct path and what is not. For myself, I just knew that's not my path. That's not going to work for me. That can't make me happy. It might make other people happy, but it won't make me happy. There was this looking for something, and that looking for something led me to Thailand and to the International Forest Monastery. And by the age of 23, I was a bhikkhu. And so faith is a powerful thing. And my sister, who is a journalist, she said about me as a young teenage man, She said I was the most irreverent person that she knew. And she was a journalist, a cynical journalist. Of course, when I met Buddhist training, I'm suddenly a faith type. Like once I'd done the 10-day retreat and experienced some peacefulness, heard the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, I never doubted from that moment the wonderfulness of the Buddha's teachings, the true cause of suffering, practice and what we need to do. So this faculty, when we cultivate faith in what we truly should have faith in, then that becomes a very deep thing. It's like we don't have faith in other things, but when we find it, we have great faith. When I went to the International Forest Monastery as a 23-year-old and struggling with restlessness and lust and various types of doubts, I never doubted the Buddha's enlightenment. I never doubted Nibbana. I never doubted the power of the Dhamma. I never doubted the existence of Arahants. And I did notice other people sometimes had doubts in these things, particularly Westerners who were just coming to explore it. And the thing I had doubt in was my ability, my capacity to patiently endure. And the thing that supported me through that was developing a lot of loving kindness for myself to support through the process. Because, you know, when Tan Ajahn Anan says Western monks, when they go forth in Thailand, it's a bit like dying and being reborn within the same life, because you leave your family, you leave your friends, you leave the food, you leave the weather. Everything is new and nothing is familiar. New people, new food, new weather, new language. And there's quite a bit of pain in that process. You have to die as the layperson that you were, and you have to be born as a monk. And there's so many rules. It's all just what you can do, you must, what you have to do, have to, and what you can't do, can't. And that's very different to life in Australia. So there's quite a bit of suffering. So when you come and you sit in the suffering, one has to be able to hold goodwill and kindness in the heart to support oneself through that process, because you can't go and hug mum, you can't go and visit your best friend and get a hug, you can't listen to music, phone a friend, all those things. And so, but developing a true loving kindness for oneself that supports the spiritual practice is wonderful and very fruitful. And we don't just stop, that's the foundation, right? We develop our loving kindness to include more and more classes of beings and greater numbers of beings, and then that becomes a pleasant type of samatha practice that gives a lot of rapture and joy, produces great merits that also support the process of developing concentration and insight. So I have been talking quite a bit. I hope that something I said has been helpful to you, trying to support my dear Tan Ajahn here, give him a break and encourage you. Tan Ajahn did mention I could take a question or two if anybody wanted to ask one. I'd be happy to answer a question.
Antamayam Dhammakataya Sadhukarang Tadamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami.
Salutation and thank you very much for the wonderful talk, Ajahn. My question is how to love oneself, truly love oneself. Many a time we do lots of things, but sometimes even out of the whole project, even if we do a small mistake, we just end up blaming ourselves, and instead of thanking what is there and being grateful, we focus on what is not there, and that eats up lots of things, and it stays for quite a long. So I really want to know you when you said about loving yourself. So I want to know from your experiences that I can take. Thank you, Ajahn.
So yes, people who have high standards and who want to do a good job when we make mistakes, we can beat ourselves up. And so I think, in my experience, I mean, be training as a monk in a strict monastery with very high standards meant that you were often not quite good enough. You're often kind of failing a little bit from the high standard and making mistakes, and it's hard. It's the thing about, one has to take on the metta practice as in a disciplined way. So we need to be able to establish that experience of goodwill, kind of an unconditional love in our own hearts. Because what happens is when we develop the capacity to hold that in the heart, it sensitizes the mind to know when something else is coming in. So it's like if we have a self-aversion habit or a self-flagellation, beating ourselves up, whipping ourselves, if we have that habit, it can be quite deep. And once it's in the mind, as you're explaining, it can last for some time. So we train ourselves in holding the antidote, the opposite of that experience, loving acceptance, goodwill. And what happens is when you get adept at being able to establish that in the mind, you begin to be able to pick it up. It's like replacement by opposites. You recognize that there is ill will aimed inwards, Pali, Bhayapada, it's one of the hindrances. It's a problem when it's aimed outwards, and it's a problem when it's aimed inwards as well. So it's not a wholesome thing. One of the hindrances, we recognize it. And so the samatha practice of metta is the antidote. And we hold the loving kindness, and we get skilled at holding the loving kindness in the heart. And in the future, when that painful mind state comes back, so you do it with the breath, right? Breathing in, may I be well. Breathing out, may I be happy. Breathing in, may I be well. Breathing out, may I be happy. And when we recognize that the painful mindset has come back, you just go straight to breathing in, may I be well. Breathing out, may I be happy. You meet it with an antidote force the moment that it starts manifesting, so that it doesn't get its roots in so deep, and so that it doesn't last so long. But like anything, there's no quick and easy trick. One has to have a disciplined practice so that the metta becomes powerful. It's talking about spiritual powers. Samadhi is one of them. Metta is a type of samadhi as well. It starts as wholesome thoughts, good intentions, goodwill. But when we get skilled at it, it's a type of samadhi. It can be developed to the jhana level. So, but it's for that reason that it's so enormously helpful and such a support to practice, because when we recognize a negative, unskillful mind state coming in, we can pick up a wholesome one. So Tan Ajahn Anan recommended to me, when I was spending my second rainy season retreat there at Wat Marp Jan 24 years ago, he told me to spend the first 5 to 10 minutes doing loving kindness to myself of every meditation sit, every one. And then afterwards, of course, one has to deepen it. One doesn't just do loving kindness for oneself, one has it for one's teachers, one's parents, all beings eventually. But one has to start with oneself, because if you want to be able to have the loving kindness that radiates outwards, you have to have it in your center. You have to have it in your heart. It has to radiate from the center, right? If it was an antenna or a 3G, 4G, 5G tower, it has to have electricity, right? It needs to be something pumping this out. So, but you can feel confident that if you do it every day, it really does become very powerful. And sometimes the negativity is there, the judging, which is too harsh, and there's some ill will and some self-judgments, and you just keep doing that. May I be well, may I be happy. I recognize that here is a sentient being that has suffering. So may I be well, may I be happy. And you just do it until the mind state goes. It's like you have to use the metta to wash that mind state out of the mind. And you can. The more you do it, the more adept you become at it. And also the less power that mind state has to fully infiltrate. And Luang Por Chah uses the analogy of sitting in the seat of the mind and seeing, that's the mindfulness and clear comprehension with some samadhi, and seeing various guests coming in the door and not letting them take the seat. This is one of the things that the metta practice helps us, is to, we have metta in the heart as the foundation. The ill will can't sit down for long. can't get in that deeply. You see it come in the door and you let it leave. It's like, you know it, you watch it come in and you watch it leave. And you maintain the metta citta as a way of being the one sitting in the chair. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Ajahn.
You're welcome.
So he was wanting to know how we make our mindfulness continuous, and what's the difference between sati and sampajanya. Okay.
So I can just talk from my experience. The way I maintain a good quality of mindfulness is that after I wake up, I get up, I do need to do a session of sitting meditation where I'm being mindful of the breathing before I go on my arms round. And then when I go on my arms round, so it's like when you take your meditation object for a period of time, that's like charging the battery, that's strengthening the quality of the mindfulness, because when we have to attend to daily duties, the mind becomes dissipated, distracted, that's normal. But when we being mindful of one object, the breathing, the mindfulness gets clearer. And so what happens is you can bring this quality of mindfulness to knowing the postures and knowing other sensations. So what I do then is, after the breath meditation, is when I go on arms round, I am mindful of the feelings at the bottom of the foot of the feet. So it's a similar practice, mindfulness of feelings, mindful of the body. And then after my have some fruit in the morning, and then I meditate again. And so I attend some chores, receive some guests, do some work, and in the afternoon I have to do another session. So in my experience, to maintain consistent mindfulness for myself, I need to be doing some sitting every morning, every afternoon, every evening, every day. That's my experience of how, because it's when you come to sit and you notice what are the qualities, what are the hindrances that are beginning to invade the mind, and how much power are they developing. And that's when we apply these spiritual powers, the right mindfulness, the right concentration, and we kind of thin out, clean out the thickness of the hindrances. And once again, there's some clarity, some presence of mind. We make the determination to take that into our activities. So for myself, yeah, I mean, even after 26 years of practice, I still need to practice every morning, every afternoon, every evening to have a good quality of mindfulness that is capable of recognizing wholesome mind states. So the mindfulness and clear comprehension, in my experience, is through being consistent with the meditation, and you're just trying to know the feelings of the breath, but that quality of knowing has this nature. One of the senior Mahateras in England, Ajahn Anan, calls it truth discerning awareness, mindfulness. So because there is presence of mind, you tend to just notice what mind states are present, what thoughts are present, whether they're wholesome, whether they're neutral, or whether they're unwholesome. So that's a clear comprehension. There's aspects of right view there. Knowing if it's wholesome, knowing if it's unwholesome, knowing if it's unwholesome, knowing if it's a hindrance, knowing if it's a kilesa, or knowing if it's parami, knowing if it's a power. This is the clear comprehension aspect. And once again, it's the consistency of the practice that makes that kind of clarity, unconfusion, lack of confusion possible. So, and I think the walking meditation practice is important, because the walking meditation practice we're doing with our eyes open, it's training ourselves to have presence of mind while there's movement and while the eyes are open. This is very helpful for learning to apply mindfulness throughout all our activities and our work throughout the day. So probably at least a session of walking meditation, if possible, would also support the consistent mindfulness and the clear comprehension. So.
Another question from one of the monks, a different monk. He's wanting to know whether faith is all about kind of being positive, or whether, like, if you actually can't do something, like accepting that you're not able to do something, is that an aspect of faith as well?
No, I don't think, I mean, I think it's an aspect of clear comprehension, mindfulness and clear comprehension. So faith can be joyful, and we need to use the joy of faith to support our practice. But when you look at various suttas, looking at the end of the Anattalakkhana Sutta and the Adittapariyaya Sutta, the Sutra on Not Self and the Fire Sermon. The last paragraph is extremely pertinent and very central, explains a process which is very common, I think, in the process of enlightenment for beings. It says that, you know, seeing the not self of the khandhas, weariness arises. The viraga, dispassion. So the nibbita, nibbita arises. So we have faith in the Buddha, we have faith in the Dhamma, we have faith in our potential, we have faith in practice, we do the practice. What happens? You start to feel weary. And that's part of the process, because weariness leads to dispassion. It's like, so it's not about being happy. It's not about being a happy self-view. It's about having right view. Being generous, keeping precepts supports well-being. But in the process of developing insight, there is going to be the arising of weariness. And that weariness is important because it sobers up the mind and it stops the mind from flowing out into fantasies about degrees and careers and promotions and relationships and status symbols and assets and all the things that people get obsessed with. And it brings the mind back and the mind turns inwards. And that's when the insight and liberation becomes possible, because as that paragraph develops, it says, weariness arises, leading to dispassion. And through dispassion, the mind is purified and liberated. It's like a couple of sentences. So I find that's very important as Buddhist practitioners to understand that being a Buddhist is not always about being positive and happy. Being a Buddhist is about practicing sincerely and hard enough to see the truth of the way things are. And then there's this kind of parallel experience of I have faith, I have some well-being, and there's a lot of weariness. And that weariness compels us, inspires us to keep practicing, to let go of our attachments so that we can experience unshakable peace beyond suffering. So we have faith in the Buddha, we have faith in our ability, we have faith in the practice, and then we have to have metta to support ourselves in the process, because we understand that our bad habits are deep. We've been doing unskillful things for a long time, and it's going to take time to purify and liberate the mind. So I think it's an aspect of wisdom, knowing what one's ability currently is, but then also one has to be, being a practicing Buddhist is hard. It requires a healthy humility and a healthy confidence at the same time. It requires accepting our limitations and a determination to go beyond them. So it does require some sophistication. And the way we work with it, the way I try to work with it, is more like a consistent, gentle, consistent pushing at our limit, trying to do a bit better, trying to do a bit better, trying to do a bit better. I have more faith in that than kind of heroic gestures for a few days or a few weeks. I have more faith in that, increasing our skillful efforts a little bit over time, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then eventually wonderful things can be accomplished.
Any other questions? Okay. It seems like that's it for the questions. Sadhu, thank you very much for joining us, for sharing your experiences, your wisdom with us.
And I rejoice in the knowledge, study, practice, faith of our Indian, Sri Lankan brothers. Encourage the practice of the lay people from various countries. May we all practice consistently, steadily, and grow in Dhamma, realize unshakable peace.